Also started shooting that show, just to give some context, in 1966, 67.
Sure.
And my whole generation was running around naked and eating granola and dropping acid and, you know, changing the world.
Yes.
And I was a nun. And
you were a flying nun, which was clearly written on acid.
But
what have I done? What was I thinking? Who even am I anymore? That's the kind of inner monologue that kicks in when a lifetime of fame, heartbreak, and unspoken truths finally boil over. And now, at 78, Sally Field isn't holding anything back. She's earned every ounce of respect with 2 Academy Awards, a gallery of unforgettable roles, and decades as one of Hollywood's most cherished stars. But beneath that smile, beneath the standing ovations and polished interviews, lies a history she's kept buried. Until now. Because Sally's ready to talk. And when she does, it's not just names. It's pain. It's disappointment. And it's the brutal honesty only time and heartache can bring. She's naming names. 6 of them. 6 actors who made her life unbearable behind the scenes. These aren't your average celebrity squabbles. These were scarring confrontations, some cold and calculated, others explosively raw, that shaped her path and left wounds that never fully healed. If you thought you knew Sally Field, or Hollywood, you're about to see it from a whole new lens. Let's start with the one who stole headlines and nearly shattered her spirit. Burt Reynolds. The world saw them as a fairy tale. The magnetic duo that turned Smokey and the Bandit into a cultural earthquake. On screen, they were pure fire. Off screen, it was a different story. Sally described Burt not just as controlling, but as someone who lived for the spotlight, even if it meant dimming everyone else's around him, including hers. He'd make sarcastic comments about her appearance, mock her choices, and often leave her second-guessing her own talent. At times, he'd pretend to praise her in interviews, only to cut her down when the cameras stopped rolling. And behind those closed doors, Sally began to vanish. In her memoir, In Pieces, she strips away the romance and reveals the darker truth. Burt wasn't just her partner, he was her silencer. Conversations became battles. Ideas were shut down, and little by little, the vibrant woman inside her started to fade. "I was never seen," she once wrote. "I was there, but not fully there. Not the real me." And yet, she held on. Not because she didn't see the truth, but because she hoped it would change. "I loved him," she admitted, "but he hurt me." The irony? The man who charmed millions with his grin was the same man who left Sally feeling unseen. The Bandit may have stolen hearts, but he also robbed hers of peace. And that was only the beginning. Then came Tommy Lee Jones. On the set of Backroads, Sally was excited. A meaty role, a layered script, a chance to dive deep. But from the moment she stepped on set, she felt the chill. Not from the air, but from Jones himself. He barely spoke to her. No friendly exchanges, no actor-to-actor connection, just cold stares, missed eye contact, and an unspoken message. Stay in your lane. She tried. She really did. She made conversation. She joked between takes. She brought the warmth she's known for. But nothing thawed the silence. "It was like working beside a statue," she later said. There was no collaboration, no respect, just distance. For Sally, whose craft thrives on emotional openness, the rejection hit hard. It wasn't just unkind, it was cruel in its own quiet way. And the worst part? It made her question her place, her worth, her right to be there. What happens when 2 brilliant actors are cast side by side, but only one is willing to dance? You get Backroads, a film critics later described as detached and strained, and now we know why. Tommy Lee Jones may be a force on screen, but behind the scenes, Sally says he was ice cold, treating her like a nuisance rather than a co-star. It was a kind of professional isolation that lingers long after the credits roll. But what really stings in all of this? Sally kept it quiet. For years, while the tabloids painted her as America's sweetheart, while the awards piled up, she carried these silent bruises. She smiled through interviews. She nodded politely beside the very people who had made her feel so small. And the public never knew. Until now. These stories aren't just Hollywood gossip. They're reminders that behind the fame, behind the designer dresses and Oscar speeches, there are real people navigating real pain. Sally Field wasn't just hurt by lovers or dismissed by colleagues. She was shaped by them. And yet, she kept creating, kept performing, kept showing up. That resilience, that's the part they never write about. But it's the most powerful chapter of all. Because when someone like Sally, someone who's endured it all, finally decides to speak, you stop and listen. Not out of shock, but out of respect. She doesn't lash out. She reveals, with clarity, with grace, and with a kind of truth that makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about life in the spotlight. When Back Roads hit the screen, critics blamed its shortcomings on a lack of spark between the leads. But the cameras didn't catch what truly stalled the film. It wasn't the dialogue or the direction, it was the chill that hung in the air between scenes. Sally Field once quietly admitted, "We were meant to be two damaged souls learning how to love, but I was doing it alone." On screen, it was heartbreak. Off screen, it was a silent endurance test. She remained professional, never missed a beat, but inside, it chipped away at her. For an actress who thrives on emotional honesty and warmth, the disconnection felt like sabotage. After that project, she never shared the frame with Tommy Lee Jones again. And though she never went public with scathing words, the cool edge in her voice whenever his name surfaced said it all. That frigid set stayed with her. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was unforgettable. But not all clashes were quiet. Some came crashing into her life like a storm. And one of them had a name that sent waves through every corner of the production: Robert Blake. When they worked together on Say Goodbye, Maggie Cole, Sally found herself caught in an unpredictable whirlwind. Blake didn't just act, he erupted. His method acting bordered on erratic behavior, veering off script and derailing carefully crafted scenes. Lines she rehearsed were suddenly irrelevant. The energy she poured into emotional beats was constantly disrupted. 1 minute, he'd be calm and immersed in character. The next, throwing tantrums at crew members over nothing. The set became a place of dread, not creativity. Sally found herself more of a mediator than an actress, trying to hold a crumbling production together with patience and grace. The weight of the chaos eventually broke the film itself. It never aired, shelved indefinitely, a casualty of dysfunction no one could rein in. For most, that would have been just another failed project. But for Sally, it left a deeper scar. Years later, she described it as more than a setback. It was wounding, her words cut with precision. There are actors who want to act. And there are actors who make others feel small to feel tall. Blake was the second kind. That experience didn't just drain her, it reshaped her boundaries. Never again would she mistake disruption for brilliance. She'd earned the right to walk away from the noise. Not every battle was fought on a set. Some began in the bright glare of awards season and played out in whispered tension between takes. When Steel Magnolias brought Sally Field and Shirley MacLaine together, audiences expected magic. a heartfelt story told by two legends. But while the cameras captured Southern charm and emotional truth, behind them was a storm of simmering rivalry. Sally came into the film with tenderness, prepared to channel grief, strength, and vulnerability into her role. Shirley arrived with something else entirely: command. She treated each day as a new conquest, reminding everyone on set of her accolades, rewriting lines mid-take, and turning quiet moments into center stage showcases. Sally tried to keep her balance, nodding, smiling, stepping aside. But it wasn't easy. One emotionally charged scene had to be redone 17 times. Not because Sally missed her mark, but because Shirley kept disrupting the rhythm, peppering the grief with offbeat humor, and stealing the emotional pulse of the moment. It wasn't collaboration. It was sabotage dressed as spontaneity. Sally never retaliated. She carried herself with calm precision. But in later interviews, her tone carried a quiet finality. Shirley brought a storm cloud with her, she once remarked, not with anger, but with reflection. It was more than creative differences. It was ego crashing into purpose. Shirley needed control. Sally needed truth. And the result left bruises beneath the surface of an otherwise beloved film. But what happens when admiration turns into disappointment? Sally once held Marlon Brando in the highest regard. He was, to her, the embodiment of raw talent and emotional power. So when they finally met, it was supposed to be unforgettable. And it was, but not in the way she hoped. Sally recounted a meeting that left her stunned. Brando, iconic and enigmatic, had no interest in warmth or mentorship. Instead, he was distant, disinterested, and casually dismissive. She tried to connect, to bridge the gap between legend and peer, but the wall never cracked. What she encountered wasn't inspiration. It was arrogance wrapped in charm. That disillusionment struck harder than any argument. She left not just disappointed, but shaken. Sometimes the hardest wounds come from the people we thought were our heroes. Then there was the night she crossed paths with a rising star, an actor whose name would later shine bright, but whose attitude left a mark that never faded. Sally never revealed his name directly, but in interviews she described a moment early in her career when a younger co-star, still relatively unknown, belittled her in front of the crew. He laughed off her suggestions, mimicked her acting style, and made her the punchline of private jokes. She was decades into her career, already with accolades to her name, and yet there she was, being diminished by someone half her age trying to make a name at her expense. That encounter left her rattled, not because she hadn't dealt with arrogance before, but because it was a reminder that no matter how high you climb, someone will still try to pull you down. The final name on her list was the one that perhaps hurt the most. A co-star she once called a friend. During a long, demanding shoot, they formed what she thought was a bond. Off-screen laughter, heartfelt talks, mutual support. But when awards season rolled around, and her name made the rounds more often than his, things changed. Cold shoulders replaced warmth. Rumors quietly spread. And she learned through a third party that he'd been campaigning behind closed doors, undermining her, planting stories, questioning her contributions. She never saw it coming. "He smiled to my face and whispered behind my back," she said once. That betrayal didn't make headlines. It didn't need to. The real drama had already unfolded in the quiet spaces, the backlots, the green rooms, the passing glances that said everything words never could. Even as decades passed and the applause faded, Sally Field never quite forgot the moment James Woods stepped onto that set. Their project, a quirky romantic comedy meant to breathe laughter into theaters, quickly warped into something far less light-hearted. James brought a certain gravity with him, an intensity that, while brilliant on screen, cast a long shadow behind the scenes. He had a way of dissecting everything, of twisting a line into a riddle, and making rehearsal rooms feel like war zones. And though some admired his sharp mind, to Sally, it felt less like collaboration and more like a performance, one meant to dominate rather than uplift. There's a kind of power play that doesn't happen with fists or shouting. It's silent, intellectual, and it cuts just as deep. Sally wasn't just reacting to Woods' constant rewrites and unscripted diversions. What wounded her most were the offhand remarks. "You're not feeling it," he said once, after a particularly vulnerable scene. He didn't say it with malice, but that made it worse. It was the way you'd dismiss an understudy, not a leading lady with decades under her belt. She left the film not just creatively bruised, but emotionally drained. The set, which should have felt like a playground, had become a psychological maze. And the exit wasn't marked with applause. It was marked with silence and a quiet promise. Never again would she allow anyone to chip away at her worth for the sake of their ego. But even that storm didn't prepare her for what would come next. Because when the name Dustin Hoffman entered the room, Sally expected a legend. What she didn't expect was humiliation. They never shared the screen, but their near collaboration in the early 80s left a scar she never fully spoke of, until years later. During the chemistry read for a now-forgotten project, Sally entered the room to find Hoffman already holding court. Laughing with producers, poking fun at the script, he made himself the center of gravity before the audition even began. And when she finally started her lines, he didn't wait. He interrupted. Not to offer insight, not to create synergy, but to correct her delivery, mid-performance, in front of everyone. What should have been a creative space became a public unraveling. Sally, an Emmy-winning actress with a proven track record, was made to feel like a student being scolded. And the worst part? It was deliberate. Days later, a mutual contact revealed the truth. Hoffman had told people the chemistry wasn't there, because he'd made sure it wouldn't be. It wasn't about the role, it was about control. Sally would later describe it as one of the most degrading experiences of her career. That moment stayed with her, not because she failed, but because someone else had needed her to feel small in order to feel big. Behind the lights and accolades, these stories reveal a side of Hollywood rarely shown. Not the glitter, not the gold, but the grit, the quiet resistance, the emotional cost, and the courage to walk away from rooms designed to dim your light. Sally Field never made noise about these experiences in the tabloids. Instead, she let time speak. She didn't need to expose, only to reflect. And when she did, her honesty echoed louder than any headline. But behind this emotional armor and artistic resilience, there's also a woman who built a life of remarkable wealth, founded not just on talent, but on strategy. Sally Field's financial journey is as nuanced as her performances. Known for her smart, low-risk investment style, she favored long-term stability over flashy deals. Over the years, she's owned a collection of luxury cars, including a sleek black Tesla Model S and a vintage Mercedes-Benz SL Class convertible. Her real estate portfolio is equally impressive. She's had properties from Malibu to the Pacific Palisades, including a breathtaking Spanish-style villa once listed for $5.9 million. She's also reportedly traveled by private jet for film festivals and award ceremonies, often chartered through discreet luxury aviation firms. Her accessories of choice have included timeless high-end watches, like a classic Cartier tank and a gold Rolex Oyster Perpetual, both spotted during red carpets and public appearances. Beyond the screen, she's ventured into voiceover work, book publishing, and behind-the-scenes production roles that brought in additional income. She's also taken part in brand collaborations and has held stakes in media companies and charitable organizations, ensuring her portfolio isn't just profitable, but purposeful. Field is said to have extensive insurance coverage, including career protection policies during her high-earning years and property insurance covering her valuable real estate holdings. There's something powerful in the way Sally Field approached money, measured, mindful, and rooted in long-term value. The lesson? Stardom fades, but strategy doesn't. She's proof that fame can be fleeting, but smart choices and self-respect create a legacy that's untouchable. As the curtain falls on this story, what lingers isn't just the tension or the setbacks, it's the resilience. It's the image of a woman who walked through the fires of fame and never let them consume her, who survived emotional manipulation, not with bitterness, but with boundaries, who endured arrogance disguised as brilliance, and emerged with quiet strength. Sally Field's Hollywood journey wasn't paved only in gold. It was carved in truth, in patience, in standing tall when everything tried to pull her down. In an industry that often rewards silence, she chose memory. In a world obsessed with power, she valued integrity. And in doing so, she gave us something far more lasting than a role. She gave us her story, one that reminds us that sometimes surviving the spotlight is the greatest performance of all.